and I don't want to ever see none of my little girl homeless.
If you had three wishes, what would they be?
To go back home and be with my family.
Yes, I can have, but I never seen such kind of snow like this.
It has been terrible.
Even though it's below zero, they out here all year.
We had somebody who perished in their car.
Especially when they're out here in the wintertime.
It hit us like a ton of bricks. It was like 8 above yesterday.
We have another young lady who's in the hospital right now. She's about to lose some of her toes.
Right down the street, someone points toward the tracks. 3 miles out, 5 miles out, it does not matter. They tell you the same thing. There are too many people out here. And then you hear another sentence, quieter but heavier. I survived. I don't want my little girls to ever live like this. Chicago is a city that can look unstoppable. Steel and glass, the loop glowing at night, river reflections, towers that hold money, jobs, and ambition. But winter has a way of revealing the truth underneath the skyline. Because there is another Chicago that exists at the same time in the same frame.
Wasn't bad, you know, my breath kept me warm. I got 2 covers and one another cover over that too, so, you know, I survived.
A Chicago built from plastic seats, thin blankets, small suitcases, and tired faces that avoid their own reflections in train windows. On my first night riding Chicago's late train, I realized something that stayed with me. I was the only one in the car who still had a home to return to. The announcements were the same. The stops were the same. The city outside looked normal. But inside the carriage, a different city appeared. For some riders, the cheapest ticket is not transportation. It is a few hours of warmth, a temporary rent payment in a heated space. If you only pass by, you might tell yourself these are strangers. If you stay long enough, you understand something unsettling. This is not a different species of life. This is a future that ordinary people can slip into faster than they expect. This is Homeless US. We are not filming from a balcony. We are going beneath the postcard version of the city, under bridges into the last train cars, into the places Chicago has learned to scroll past. If you believe people living through this deserve to be seen with dignity, stay with us to the end. Because what you are about to hear is not just a story about homelessness. It is a story about what a city becomes when survival is the only
There's too many
plan
homeless
left.
in Chicago, and not only in here, in the whole Chicago.
Part 1, the two-tier city. Above ground, Chicago still looks like a promise. Lights from towers reflect on the Black River. Office workers walk fast, shoulders tight against the wind. Headphones in, coffee in hand, messages unread. Below, the air changes. Down by Lower Wacker, the sound becomes heavier. Truck engines echo. Wind slides through bridge beams like a blade. Cold rises from the river and finds every gap in your clothing.
Right down the street, step under the train back there, sleep outside.
This is where you see the two Chicagos in the same moment. Above, people checking the time, worried about missing a train to work. Below, people who only need a train, any train, as long as it is warm enough to keep them alive until morning. In this city, a few dollars might be a snack to you. For someone without housing, it could be the only rent they can afford, rent for heat. A man tells us, this is the best place in this weather. It's warm. He does not say it like a complaint. He says it like a fact. And the fact is simple. When the city is cold enough to become dangerous, people will go wherever the danger is slightly less. That is not laziness. That is survival math. Part 2, the 2025 snapshot. Numbers down, fears still high. On paper, Chicago can look improved. In the most recent point-in-time snapshot, the city reported about 7,400 people experiencing homelessness on a single night, with most in shelters and roughly 1,300 unsheltered, outside under bridges, in vehicles, and in other places not meant for sleep. Compared with the prior year, the count appears lower. But here is what the paper does not capture. Winter does not last one night. A point-in-time count is a single snapshot. Chicago winter is a season. Cold returns in waves. Wind returns without warning. And the same person who looks fine today can be in serious trouble tomorrow. When temperatures drop to dangerous levels, the city talks about emergency status, warming centers, and expanded hours. Press releases talk about meeting demand. But on Lower Wacker and on trains circling the city after midnight, the question becomes much more direct. If the shelter is full, if the warming center is far, if you are carrying your entire life in a backpack, where do you go when the wind cuts through your clothes and you cannot get warm again? One man points to a small setup and says, "That's my little home." And in that sentence, you hear what homelessness really is. Not just the absence of a house, the presence of constant vulnerability. So in this episode, we step away from comforting summaries and go into the places where numbers stop feeling abstract. Under street level, into the roar of trucks, onto train seats where sleep is never fully safe. Part 3, Lower Wacker, the city beneath the postcard. If the Chicago above ground is the postcard sent around the world, Lower Wacker is the back of that postcard. The part nobody frames is a second layer of roadway, concrete ceilings, steel pillars, yellow light, a sound that never fully stops. Down here, you do not hear rooftop conversations. You hear engines, brakes, and wind. For years, Lower Wacker has been one of the places where homelessness becomes visible because it offers something rare in winter. A break from open sky, a break from direct wind, a place where a blanket can survive one more night. But Lower Wacker is not a stable neighborhood. It is a temporary truce. Tents appear, pallets get stacked, plastic bins line up like tiny storage units. And then the cycle repeats. New fencing, fresh signs, cleanup operations. Trucks arrive, shelter disappears. The roadway returns to the version of the city meant for cars, not people. Some call that restoring order. But when you stand here and look at the faint outlines of where blankets once lay, a different question rises. Every time a new fence goes up, are we solving the problem? Or are we pushing it into darker corners where cameras are less likely to see it, but the cold is just as real? Because homelessness does not vanish when it is cleared. It moves. And moving is not neutral. Moving costs people what little stability they have. Part 4. The people who live in the noise. This is not a story about types. It is a story about events. One injury, one rent increase, one relationship breaking, one job lost, and suddenly a person is here. We will use composite profiles in this section based on common, widely reported patterns to protect privacy while telling the truth about how people fall. Composite Profile 1. Luis, the worker who fell after an injury. Luis is nearly 50. He used to deliver packages for a logistics company. A back injury changed everything. Work became impossible. Insurance dragged. Debt grew. His room rental went up. Not by thousands, by enough to break him. One night, he was left with a backpack and a thin jacket. He tells us, paraphrased, "I drove this road for years. I never thought the loading zone would become where I lay my blanket." He does not say it dramatically. He says it like he is still trying to understand how fast life can turn. Composite Profile 2. Maya, the young adult priced out. Maya is 27. She worked as a server. She tried to keep up, but wages and rent stopped matching. A relationship ended. A new bill arrived. A few missed payments became a wall. Now her bed is a few pallets by a pillar and a blanket from a volunteer group. She tells us, paraphrased, "Down here, at least I'm not bothering anyone. Up there, they don't want to see us." That sentence is the emotional center of the city. Not just I need help, but I feel unwanted. Composite Profile 3. Harold, the older rider on the night train. Harold is in his 70s. His body holds the record of time. Cold hits him harder than it used to. On the train, he sits very still, conserving warmth the way you conserve money. He tells us, paraphrased, "At least here the wind doesn't cut my face. I know they'll wake me up at the end. I just need one sleep where I don't have to guard my things." When people ask why someone would ride trains all night, the answer is not complicated. Because when a city is cold, warmth becomes a currency, and many people are priced out of warmth. Part 5. Sweeps, notices, and the cost of starting over from zero. Street sweep sounds harmless if you have never lived outside. It sounds like maintenance, a cleaning schedule, a routine service. But for people living in tents, a sweep is not a cleaning. It is an eviction without a lease. In Chicago, encampment clearings often begin with notices. Paper taped to posts. A date, a time, a warning. Then on that day, crews arrive. Sanitation trucks, sometimes police, sometimes multiple departments at once. Tents come down. Belongings get moved. The area gets fenced or posted. Advocacy groups warn about what gets lost in these moments, because the most important items are often small and easy to throw away by mistake. Medication, identification, benefit paperwork, photos of children, letters from family, documents that prove you exist inside a system. People living outside learn to make impossible choices. Do you keep your blanket or your paperwork? Do you carry your water or your photographs? Do you save your coat or your medicine? And here's the part that needs honest framing. Many housed residents have concerns. Trash, hygiene, safety, needles, disorder. Those concerns are real. But the human cost of sweeps is also real. The impact is not measured only in cleanliness. It is measured in how many times a person is forced to restart life from nothing. If you push people out of one place without giving them a stable alternative, you do not end homelessness. You simply relocate it, often to places that are more dangerous and harder for outreach teams to reach. Part 6. The Night Train, a moving waiting room. When the last office lights go out, another Chicago work shift begins. On the trains, plastic seats slowly disappear under coats, blankets, and tightly tied bags. The lighting is bright and unforgiving. It makes everyone look paler, more tired. The sound of the wheels becomes a clock. For people without housing, the night train is a moving waiting room. Not because they want to be downtown, because it is warmer than the sidewalk, because it feels safer than some corners, because if nobody forces them off, they can rest for a few hours. This is where you see the city's moral tension in real time. Some passengers avoid eye contact. Some change cars. Some look angry. And some do small, quiet acts. A still warm sandwich placed on a seat. A bottled water slid gently forward. A jacket offered without speeches. Outreach groups sometimes appear late at night with medical backpacks, food, and calm voices. Not demanding, not humiliating, just asking, "Are you okay tonight? Do you need a blanket? Do you want directions to a warming center?" In winter, that kind of help is not symbolic. It can be life-preserving, and it raises a question Chicago cannot ignore forever. How long before we start treating train cars as bedrooms as normal? Because if that becomes normal, the city has accepted something it should never accept. Part 7. The Pedway. Warmth built for workers, shared by survivors. Downtown Chicago has an underground network that most tourists barely notice. The Pedway. Tunnels and corridors connecting blocks. It was designed for office workers to avoid snow and wind, to keep commerce moving. On bitter days, it feels like another climate. Warmer, cleaner, brighter. But in corners, along quiet edges, you may see signs of another use. A backpack resting against a wall. A person sitting too long in the same spot. A blanket folded quickly when someone approaches. This is what happens in cities under pressure. Infrastructure built for convenience becomes infrastructure for survival. Not because people are trying to break rules, because winter does not negotiate. And when a city's housing is too expensive, the city's hidden warm spaces become a substitute for homes. It is a silent reminder that homelessness is not somewhere else. It lives inside the same systems we walk through every day. Part 8. Shelters, warming centers, and the limits of available. On the city website, the winter response looks organized. Shelter lists, warming center addresses, updated hours. When temperatures drop, the city urges residents to call for help if they see someone at risk. Some programs work. Some people do get indoors. Some people do get connected to housing pathways. And those successes matter. A door that locks changes a person's brain. Sleep becomes possible. Appointments become possible. Recovery becomes more realistic. But the gap remains. Because when thousands still have to choose between a sidewalk, a train seat, or the underside of a roadway, available is not the same as accessible. A bed that exists on paper may still be unreachable due to distance, intake hours, lack of documents, safety concerns, or rules that collide with real life. And that is where policy becomes real. Not in meetings, in weather. The real measure is not whether a program exists. It is whether it reaches the person before the night does. Part 9. The quiet hands that arrive on time. When a city response is slow, small acts often become the fastest thing in the system. A church group bringing hot soup on a schedule, walking from pillar to pillar, setting food down beside people, not tossing it from distance. Students collecting blankets and thermal gear and showing up at the last stops where the cold hits hardest. But there is another truth here that people overlook. People experiencing homelessness often keep each other alive. They warn each other about sweeps. They watch each other's belongings during clinic visits. They share food and information. They trade tiny strategies for staying safe. And sometimes the most important thing is not an item. It is being addressed like a person. Not those people. Not the homeless. Not a label. A name. Louise. Maya. Harold. Sir. Ma'am. That costs nothing. But it changes the temperature of a city. Because dignity Part 10, Outro, What Chicago Chooses to Be. If you live in Chicago, the first step is not dramatic. Learn where warming centers are. Support credible outreach groups if you can. Be careful, be respectful, and do not make the street more dangerous with performative interactions. And if you're watching from somewhere else, do not treat this as a Chicago-only story. The pattern exists in many cities. Rising housing costs, thin margins, a safety net with gaps, winter turning those gaps into danger. This is Homeless US. If you watched this far, you already did one thing that matters. You stayed long enough to see people, not just scenery. Now to one more. Share this episode. Leave a comment with one action you think Chicago should take this year. And subscribe to Homeless US so these stories are not buried under silence. We hope that one day Chicago's night trains will be what they were meant to be. A way to get people home, not a substitute for having one. And until that day comes, we will keep going down to the lowest levels of these cities. to remind the world of a basic truth. No one is born to sleep under a roadway. No one is born to pay rent and train tickets. And no city should accept that as normal. Thank you for watching.